Astute Quotations, Part 32. The most anxious man in a prison is the warden. George Bernard Shaw. The devil can quote Shakespeare for his own purpose. George Bernard Shaw. Hamlet's experiences simply could not have happened to a plumber. George Bernard Shaw. The worst thing you can possibly do to a woman is to deprive her of a grievance. Author John Beverly Nichols. Enthusiasm for a cause sometimes warps judgment. President William Howard Taft. If you always think it's too soon, you're sure to come too late. German proverb. Timidity relieves one of responsibility. Proverb from Burma. Words are not necessary to declare love. Welsh proverb. Conferences at the top level are always courteous. Name-calling is left to the foreign ministers. New York Governor and diplomat Averell Harriman. When a woman is speaking to you, listen to what she says with her eyes. Victor Hugo. He who has money has in his pocket those who have none. Tolstoy. Repay evil with good, and you deprive the evildoer of all the pleasure of his wickedness. Tolstoy. The less routine, the more life. American educator Amos Bronson Alcott, 1799 to 1888. If you can't think of any other way to flatter a man, tell him he's a man who can't be flattered. From the magazine Construction Digest. Honesty is the best policy, but he who is governed by that maxim is not an honest man. Economist Richard Whately, 1783 to 1863. To know your ruling passion, examine your castles in the air. Richard Whately. Lose an hour in the morning, and you'll spend all day looking for it. Richard Whately. Galileo probably would have escaped persecution if his discoveries could have been disproved. Richard Whately. The devil is a gentleman who never goes where he is not welcome. Novelist John A. Lincoln. The better one is morally, the less aware they are of their virtue. James Anthony Froude, historian, 1818 to 1894. To be happy is not the purpose for which you are placed in this world. James Anthony Froude. Try praising your wife, even if it does not frighten her at first. Evangelist Billy Sunday. Truth gives a short answer. Lies go roundabout. German proverb. Many return from war who can't give account of the battle. Italian proverb. One whore calls another whore nasty names. Proverb from Malta. The only way to understand a woman is to love her, and then it isn't necessary to understand her. Journalist Sidney Harris, 1917 to 1986. Every man who knows how to read has it in his power to magnify himself, to multiply the ways in which he exists. Aldous Huxley. Proverbs are always platitudes until you have personally experienced the truth of them. Aldous Huxley. The prime purpose of eloquence is to keep other people from speaking. Louis Vermeil, whoever that is. Caricature is the tribute that mediocrity pays to genius. Oscar Wilde. If you want to know what a woman really means, look at her. Don't listen to her. Oscar Wilde. We are living in an age when only the dull are treated seriously. Oscar Wilde, who must have been listening to Pearl Jam and Nirvana. The fatality of good resolutions is that they're always too late. Oscar Wilde. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. Confucius. When a man repeats a promise again and again, he means to fail you. Edmund Fuller, novelist and historian. A lady is a woman who makes a man behave like a gentleman. Russell Lines, former managing editor of Harper's. Young man, if she asks you if you like her hair that way, beware. The woman has already committed matrimony in her heart. Journalist Don Marquis, 1878 to 1937. Cleanliness becomes more important when godliness is unlikely. P.J. O'Rourke. An executive is someone employed to talk with visitors so that the other employees can keep on working. Anonymous. Modesty is one of the 7 deadly virtues. Playwright Alfred Sutro, 1863 to 1933. That's the penalty we have to pay for our acts of foolishness. Someone else has to suffer for them. Alfred Sutro. He who is only wise lives a sad life. Voltaire. On the flimsiest pretext, the wolf seizes the sheep. Italian proverb. When wooing a woman, open your ears more than your eyes. Norwegian proverb. What you are telling me cannot be true. French spy Jeannie Rousseau, using one of the lines that helped her extract information from German officers during World War II. The person who is hardest to forgive is the one who can teach you the greatest lessons. Self-help author Louise Hay. Premature independence is the daughter of conceit. Idries Shah, writer on Sufism. The most important part of being an effective manager is not what happens when you are there, but what happens when you aren't there. Ken Blanchard, author of The 1-Minute Manager, a work accused of extensive plagiarism. If you want a decision, go to the point of danger. General James Gavin, U.S. Army. They're the ones I want. They're the strugglers. They've had to cope with adversity. Colonel John Ripley, United States Marine Corps, regarding cadets at the bottom of their class. The essence of a general's job is to assist in developing a clear sense of purpose, to keep the junk from getting in the way of important things. Lieutenant General Walter Ulmer, U.S. Army. Don't just do something, stand there. Daniel Berrigan, S.J., during 1960s war protests. The more I become involved emotionally in my client's cause, the less I am able to do for him. Joseph Ball, president American College of Trial Lawyers. The quietness of his tone italicized the malice of his reply. Truman Capote from In Cold Blood. To love is to live on the precipice. Anne Declos, author of The Story of O. Those you trust the most can steal the most. Lawrence Leaf, industrial security analyst. We have reason to believe you have committed an offense. London parking ticket. A good manager is a man who isn't worried about his own career, but rather the careers of those who work for him. H.S.M. Burns, President, Shell Oil. The most important marketer in our company is the man or woman on the loading dock who decides not to drop the damned box into the back of the truck. Quoted by Tom Peters, business advisor. Ralph Houck's best quality is that when he's not picking you up, he's leaving you alone. Pitcher Jim Bouton. Those who play with the devil's toys will be brought by degrees to wield his sword. Buckminster Fuller. One of the most important tasks of a manager is to eliminate his people's excuses for failure. Robert Townsend, author of Up the Organization. A zealous sense of mission is possible only where there is opposition to it. D.W. Ewing, Harvard School of Business. One seldom recognizes the devil when he is putting his hand on your shoulder. Albert Speer, architect and confidant of Hitler. Education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence. Robert Frost. Every educated person is a future enemy. Martin Bormann, Nazi official. Beware of people whose halos are on too tight. Sally Stanford, owner of a famed San Francisco bordello. Propaganda works best when those who are being manipulated are confident they are acting on their own free will. Joseph Goebbels, Nazi minister of propaganda. Beware of men bearing flowers. Novelist Muriel Spark. Frankness is usually a euphemism for rudeness. Muriel Spark. I never trust the airlines from those countries where the pilots believe in the afterlife. Muriel Spark. Always, in a moment of extreme danger, things can be done which had previously been thought impossible. Erwin Rommel, German general. The battle is fought and decided by the quartermasters long before the shooting begins. Erwin Rommel. A quartermaster is responsible for providing food, clothing, and shelter for troops. One cannot permit unique opportunities to slip by for the sake of trifles. Erwin Rommel. There is only one cardinal rule. One must always listen to the patient. Oliver Sacks, British neurologist. Doubt is the brother of shame. Dr. Erik Erikson. A fastidious person in the throes of love is a rich source of mirth. Martha Duffy, arts editor, Time magazine. If you've never been hated by your child, you've never been a parent. Actress Bette Davis. Shrinking away from death is something unhealthy and abnormal, which robs the second half of life of its purpose. Carl Jung. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Carl Jung. Nothing is more repulsive than a furtively prurient spirituality. It is just as unsavory as gross sensuality. Carl Jung. Only the really plain people know about love. The very fascinating ones try so hard to create an impression that they soon exhaust their talents. Katharine Hepburn. Solitude is not something you must hope for in the future. Rather, it is a deepening of the present. Thomas Merton, Catholic monk and writer. Wisdom consists of the anticipation of consequences. Norman Cousins, journalist and professor. Fanaticism is overcompensation for doubt. Novelist Robertson Davies. The biggest communication problem is that we don't listen to understand. We listen in order to reply. Werner Erhard. To live a creative life, we must lose our fear of being wrong. Werner Erhard, one of the top 5 thinkers of the last century. Sin is whatever obscures the soul. French author André Gide. No theory is good except on condition that one use it to go beyond. André Gide. The closer and more confidential our relationship with someone, the less we are entitled to ask about what we are not voluntarily told. Louis Kronenberger, literary critic for Time magazine. A man who trusts nobody is apt to be the kind of man nobody trusts. Harold Macmillan, British Prime Minister. The greatest happiness you can have is knowing that you do not necessarily require happiness. William Saroyan, novelist and playwright. Whenever one finds oneself inclined to bitterness, it is a sign of emotional failure. Bertrand Russell. Boredom, after all, is a form of criticism. William Phillips, journalist and editor. Sometimes the first duty of intelligent men is the restatement of the obvious. George Orwell. The more refined and subtle our minds, the more vulnerable they are. Paul Tournier, Swiss physician. Before you can be eccentric, you must know where the circle is. Actress Ellen Terry, 1847 to 1928. Those who are silent, self-effacing, and attentive become the recipients of confidences. Thornton Wilder, novelist and playwright. Nothing is so poor and melancholy as an art that is interested in itself and not in its subject. George Santayana, Spanish philosopher. Some women won't buy anything unless they pay a lot. Cosmetics executive Helena Rubinstein. The miniskirt enables young ladies to run faster, and because of it, they might have to. Former Mayor John Lindsay of New York. A woman's dress should be like a barbed wire fence, serving its purpose without obstructing the view. Sophia Loren. To be good is to be forgotten. I'm going to be so bad I'll always be remembered. Theda Bara, star of the silent film era. I'd love to kiss you, but I just washed my hair. Betty Davis, 1932. They didn't want it good. They wanted it Wednesday. Robert Heinlein regarding writing science fiction for magazines. It was from Handel that I learned that style consists in force of assertion. George Bernard Shaw. Leap and the net will appear. Photographer Julia Margaret Cameron, 1815 to 1879. In Russia, all tyrants believe poets to be their worst enemies. Yevgeny Yevtushenko, Russian poet. The pimp has a grin, never a smile. Jean Genet, French playwright. The more constraints one imposes, the more one frees oneself, and the arbitrariness of the constraint serves only to obtain precision of execution. Igor Stravinsky. Show me an orchestra that likes its conductor, and I'll show you a lousy orchestra. Goddard Lieberson, composer and former president of Columbia Records. Show me a man who claims he is objective, and I'll show you a man with illusions. Henry R. Luce, magazine mogul. Some people are so busy learning the tricks of the trade that they never learn the trade. Vernon Law, pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates, winner of the Cy Young Award in 1960. The less I say, the more rumors I start. Bobby Clark, Hockey Hall of Famer. You can't have what you're unwilling to give away. Werner Erhard. The weaker partner in a marriage is the one who loves the most. Actress Eleanora Duse, 1858 to 1924. With a group of bankers, I always had the feeling that success was measured by the extent one gave nothing away. Lord Longford, British author. Banality is a symptom of non-communication. Men hide behind their cliches. Playwright Eugene Ionesco. I'm not here for your amusement. You're here for mine. Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols. Thus Belial, with words clothed in reason's garb, counseled ignoble ease and peaceful sloth, not peace. John Milton. To apologize is to lay the foundation for a future offense. Ambrose Bierce, author of The Devil's Dictionary. It is not the voice that commands the story. It is the ear. Italo Calvino, Italian author. Men rule the world, and women rule the men. English proverb. Archbishop, definition. A Christian ecclesiastic of a rank superior to that attained by Christ. H.L. Mencken. The chief contribution of Protestantism to human thought is its massive proof that God is a bore. H.L. Mencken. A man with so-called character is often a simple piece of mechanism. He has often only one point of view for the extremely complicated relationships of life. Playwright August Strindberg. Deep down, I'm pretty superficial. Actress Ava Gardner. Caution is the confidential agent of selfishness. President Woodrow Wilson. When I give a man an office, I watch him carefully to see whether he is swelling or growing. Woodrow Wilson. It is the confession, not the priest, that gives us absolution. Oscar Wilde. When a nation's young men are conservative, its funeral bell is already rung. Henry Ward Beecher. 'Tis an ill cook that cannot lick his own fingers. From Romeo and Juliet. True creativity begins where language ends. Arthur Koestler, Hungarian-British author. A man is his own easiest dupe, for what he wishes to be true, he generally believes to be true. Demosthenes. Let's say that again. Demosthenes, 4th century BC. Men over 40 are no judges of a book written in a new spirit. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Society is a masked ball where everyone hides his real character and reveals it by hiding. Emerson. Challenge, not desire, lies at the heart of seduction. Jean Baudrillard, French cultural theorist. If you say I love you, then you've already fallen in love with language, which is already a form of breakup and infidelity. Baudrillard. I wept not, so to stone within I grew. Dante, from the Inferno. When I tell any truth, it is not for the sake of convincing those who do not know it, but for the sake of defending those who do. William Blake. The weak in courage is strong in cunning. William Blake. Truth sits upon the lips of dying men. Poet Matthew Arnold, 1832 to 1888. Man's mind is so formed that it is far more susceptible to falsehood than to truth. Erasmus. I have always considered it as treason against the great republic of human nature to make any man's virtues the means of deceiving him. Samuel Johnson. In the animal kingdom, the rule is eat or be eaten. In the human kingdom, define or be defined. Psychiatrist Thomas Zaz. In order to move others deeply, we must deliberately allow ourselves to be carried away beyond the bounds of our normal sensibility. Author Joseph Conrad. The secret of the demagogue is to appear as dumb as his audience, so that these people can believe themselves as dumb as he is. Karl Kraus, Austrian satirist, 1874 to 1936. Let the people think they govern, and they will be governed. William Penn. Democracy is not so much a form of government as a set of principles. President Woodrow Wilson. We are not permitted to choose the frame of our destiny, but what we put into it is ours. Dag Hammarskjöld, UN Secretary. A host is like a general. Calamities often reveal his genius. Horace, 1st century BC. They sicken of the calm who know the storm. Dorothy Parker. Last week I went to Philadelphia, but it was closed. W.C. Fields. Don't make me release the flying monkeys. The Witch from the Wizard of Oz. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. Sun Tzu, You will never live if you are looking for the meaning of life. Albert Camus. The greater the ignorance, the greater the dogmatism. Sir William Osler, Canadian physician. If a little dreaming is dangerous, the cure for it is not to dream less, but to dream more, to dream all the time. Marcel Proust. The bashful are always aggressive at heart. Charles Horton Cooley, sociologist, 1864 to 1929. To persuade is more trouble than to dominate, and the powerful seldom take this trouble if they can avoid it. Charles Horton Cooley. I tell my students to try early in life to find an unattainable objective. George Wald, biochemist. I think I want to be in love with you, but I don't know how. Angela Carter, English novelist. Rhythm is 90% of interpretation. Violinist Ruggiero Ricci. To do just the opposite is also a form of imitation. Physicist Georg Lichtenberg, 1742 to 1799. Virtue by premeditation isn't worth much. Georg Lichtenberg. The purpose of education is to keep a culture from being drowned in senseless repetitions, each of which claims to offer a new insight. Harold Rosenberg, art critic. There is no taking trout with dry breeches. Cervantes, from Don Quixote. One of the most time-consuming things is to have an enemy. Author E. B. White. An error is the more dangerous in proportion to the degree of truth it contains. Henri Frederick Amiel, 1821 to 1881, Swiss philosopher. The enemy of the conventional wisdom is not ideas, but the march of events. John Kenneth Galbraith, economist. Evil is something you recognize immediately you see it. It works through charm. Novelist Brian Masters. Where there is no love, there is no understanding. Oscar Wilde. Extreme positions are not succeeded by moderate ones, but by contrary extreme positions. Nietzsche. After coming into contact with a religious man, I always feel I must wash my hands. Nietzsche. What separates two people most profoundly is a different sense and degree of cleanliness. Nietzsche. People who mistake facts for ideas are incomplete thinkers. Novelist Cynthia Ozick. We are built to make mistakes, coded for error. Lewis Thomas, physician and educator. I would much rather have men ask why I have no statue than why I do have one. Cato the Elder, 2nd century BC. Man is the head of the family, woman the neck that turns the head. Chinese proverb. Blaming mother is just a negative way of clinging to her still. Nancy Friday, pioneer author in the field of sexuality. A fanatic is a man who does what he thinks the Lord would do if he knew the facts of the case. Journalist Peter Finley Peter Dunn, 1867 to 1936. Fervor is the weapon of choice of the impotent. Psychiatrist Frantz Fanon. One's real life is so often the life that one does not lead. Oscar Wilde. What harsh judges fathers are to all young men. Terence, 2nd century BC. The essence of a man is found in his faults. French painter Francis Picabia. Too great a hurry to discharge an obligation is a form of ingratitude. La Rochefoucauld, 1613 to 1680. Benefits should be conferred gradually, and in that way they will taste better. Machiavelli. It is kindness to refuse immediately what you intend to deny. Publilius Syrus, 1st century BC. Those who love to be feared fear to love. St. Francis de Sales. Movements born in hatred very quickly take on the characteristics of the thing they oppose. J. S. Hargood, Archbishop of York. To have a man who can flirt is next thing to indispensable to a leader of society. Scottish novelist Margaret Oliphant, 1828 to 1897. The middle of life is the testing ground of character and strength. Margaret Oliphant. Why does a man take it for granted that a girl who flirts with him wants him to kiss her when 9 times out of 10 she only wants him to want to kiss her? Journalist Helen Rowland, 1875 to 1950. The chief excitement in a woman's life is spotting women who are fatter than she is. Helen Rowland. Men always fall for frigid women because they put on the best show. Actress Fanny Brice, 1891 to 1951. He gains everyone's approval who mixes the pleasant with the useful. Horace, 1st century BC. We always plan too much and think too little. Economist Joseph Schumpeter, 1888 to 1950. It is the superfluous things over which men sweat. Seneca, 1st century AD. I think with the Romans that the general of today should be a soldier tomorrow if necessary. Thomas Jefferson. Every revolution has its counter-revolution. That is a sign the revolution is working. C. Wright Mills, sociologist. Inspiration is intention obeyed. Emily Carr, Canadian artist and writer, 1871 to 1945. The excellence of a gift lies in its appropriateness rather than its value. Charles Dudley Warner, essayist, 1829 to 1900. People always overdo the matter when they attempt deception. Charles Dudley Warner. A woman set on anything will walk right through the moral crockery without wincing. Charles Dudley Warner. I think the 24-hour day is here to stay. Max Beardmore, English essayist. There are few good women who do not tire of their role. Rochefoucauld. The height of cleverness is being able to conceal it. Rochefoucauld. What makes us so bitter against people who outwit us is that they think themselves more clever than we are. Rochefoucauld. None are so fond of secrets as those who do not mean to keep them. C. Colton, 1780 to 1832. All growth is a leap in the dark, a spontaneous, unpremeditated act without benefit of experience. Novelist Henry Miller. Guilt has very quick ears to an accusation. Novelist Henry Fielding. The offender never pardons. English proverb. Hate traps us by binding us too tightly to our adversaries. Czech author Milan Kundera. If you build castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put the foundations under them. Thoreau. A powerful idea communicates some of its strength to him who challenges it. Marcel Proust, or Proust. Very insightful quotation there. Those who don't want to imitate anything produce nothing. Salvador Dali. Even impartiality is partial. Georg Lichtenberg, German physicist, 1742 to 1799. He makes people pleased with him by making them first pleased with themselves. Lord Chesterfield, 1684 to 1773. The weeping of an heir is laughter in disguise. Publilius Syrus, 1st century BC. The difficulty lies not in new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. John Maynard Keynes, economist. In any great organization, it is far, far safer to be wrong with the majority than to be right alone. Economist John Kenneth Galbraith. Insanity is often the logic of an accurate mind overtasked. Oliver Wendell Holmes, Sr. When you don't know what you're doing and what you are doing is the best, that's inspiration. French film director Robert Bresson, Jr. A highbrow is the kind of person who looks at a sausage and thinks of Picasso. Author A.P. Herbert. I am sure so little of nothing as my own intentions. Lord Byron, 1788 to 1824. The power of the culture industry's ideology is such that conformity has replaced consciousness. Theodor Adorno, German sociologist. And if that weren't true, no one would have ever heard of Billy Joel. Intolerance of ambiguity is the mark of an authoritarian personality. Theodor Adorno. We do not see the lens through which we look. Anthropologist Ruth Benedict, 1887 to 1948. We are made kind by being kind. Eric Hoffer, pop philosopher. The weakness of a soul is proportionate to the number of truths that must be kept from it. Eric Hoffer. Knowledge is a polite word for dead but not buried imagination. E. Cummings. The things we know best are the things we haven't been taught. Valvanargos, 1715 to 1747, a writer and friend of Voltaire. It is difficult for a woman to define her feelings in language which is chiefly made by men to express theirs. Thomas Hardy. Man acts as though he were the shaper and master of language, while in fact language remains the master of man. Martin Heidegger. falsehood is invariably the child of fear in one form or another. Aleister Crowley, 1875 to 1947. Crowley was a widely published writer on the occult. Someone who knows too much finds it hard not to lie. Ludwig Wittgenstein, 1889 to 1951. Don't get involved in partial problems, but always take flight to where there is a free view over the whole single great problem, even if this view is still not a clear one. Wittgenstein. Nothing is so difficult as not deceiving oneself. Wittgenstein. Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. Wittgenstein. In literature, the ambition of the novice is to acquire the literary language. The struggle of the adept is to get rid of it. George Bernard Shaw. Loneliness is never more cruel than when it is felt in close propinquity with someone who has ceased to communicate. Germaine Greer, Australian feminist writer. One of the first businesses of a sensible man is to know when he is beaten and to leave off fighting at once. Samuel Butler. It was the men I deceived the most that I loved the most. Marguerite Duras, French author and filmmaker. Definition of incompatibility. In matrimony, a similarity of tastes, particularly the taste for domination. Ambrose Bierce, from his Devil's Dictionary, considered one of the finest pieces of American literature. Married life requires shared mystery, even when all the facts are known. Novelist Richard Ford. The broad masses of a population are more amenable to the appeal of rhetoric than to any other force. Adolf Hitler. Every age develops its own particular forms of pathology, which express in exaggerated form its underlying character structure. Historian Christopher Lasch. When men and women agree, it is only in their conclusions. Their reasons are always different. Philosopher George Santayana. Schizophrenia cannot be understood without understanding despair. Psychiatrist R.D. Laing. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Carl Jung. Any plan conceived in moderation must fail when the circumstances are set in extremes. Prince Metternich of Austria, 1773 to 1859. The obvious is always least understood. Prince Metternich. Stability is not immobility. Prince Metternich. Never ascribe to an opponent motives meaner than your own. J. M. Barrie, creator of Peter Pan. A man's most open actions have a secret side to them. Author Joseph Conrad. To read between the lines was easier than to follow the text. Author Henry James. We should often be ashamed of our finest actions if the world understood all the motives behind them. Rochefoucauld, 1613 to 1680. A woman's 2 cents worth is worth 2 cents in the music business. Loretta Lynn. A people always ends by resembling its shadow. Rudyard Kipling. The most advanced nations are always those who navigate the most. Emerson. Anger and jealousy can no more bear to lose sight of the objects than love. George Eliot, 1819 to 1880. A point of view can be a dangerous luxury when substituted for insight and understanding. Marshall McLuhan. The more opinions you have, the less you see. Wim Wenders, German filmmaker. When I want to draw a camel, I no longer limit myself, as I once did, to looking only at camels. Jean Dubuffet, French painter and sculptor. The worst tragedy for a poet is to be admired through being misunderstood. Jean Cocteau, French author and filmmaker. There are truths that one can only say after having won the right to say them. Jean Cocteau. Rain is the best policeman. Police saying. Photographers stop photographing a subject too soon before they have exhausted the possibilities. Photographer Dorothea Lange. I believe in living with the camera and not using the camera. Dorothea Lange. Surefire things are degrading to the human spirit. Dorothea Lange. I'm not a nice girl. I'm a photographer. Photographer Bernice Abbott, 1898 to 1991, when warned that a woman photographer shouldn't be hanging out on the streets of New York's Bowery. We often want one thing and pray for another, not telling the truth, even to the gods. Seneca, 1st century A.D. To say that a thing has never yet been done among men is to erect a barrier stronger than reason, stronger than discussion. Thomas Brackett Reed, Speaker of the U.S. House from 1889 to 1891. The discovery of truth is prevented more effectively not by the false appearance things present and which mislead one into error, not directly by weakness of the reasoning power, but by preconceived opinion, by prejudice. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, 1788 to 1860. Obstinacy is the result of the will forcing itself into the place of the intellect. Arthur Schopenhauer. Jerry Ford is so dumb he can't fart and chew gum at the same time. President Lyndon Johnson, referring to the future president. Any solution to a problem changes the problem. British journalist R.W. Johnson. The best augury of a man's success in his profession is that he thinks it's the finest in the world. Novelist George Eliot, 1819 to 1880. Get your facts first, and then you can distort them as much as you like. Mark Twain. Everywhere I go, I smell fresh paint. Princess Diana. It's not wise to violate rules until you know how to observe them. T.S. Eliot. Over-emphatic negatives always suggest that what is being denied may be what is really being asserted. Jonathan Rabin, or Raban, British novelist. Originality implies being bold enough to go beyond accepted norms. Psychiatrist Anthony Storr. If we did not look to marriage as the principal source of happiness, fewer marriages would end in tears. Anthony Storr. That person is lonely who has no one for whom he or she is number one. Psychiatrist Helene Deutsch. He that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. From the Book of Proverbs. There are no good girls gone wrong, just bad girls found out. Mae West. Every theory is a self-fulfilling prophecy that orders experience into the framework that it provides. Biologist Ruth Hubbard. There is no greater impediment to progress in the sciences than the desire to see it take place too quickly. Physicist G.C. Lichtenberg, 1742 to 1799. Nothing leads the scientist so astray as a premature truth. Biologist Jean Rostand. When a woman wants a man and lusts after him, the lover need not bother to conjure up opportunities, for she will find more in an hour than we men could think of in a century. Pierre de Bourdeille, French courtier, 1530 to 1614. He who undervalues himself is justly undervalued by others. William Hazlitt, 1778 to 1830. Error is often more earnest than truth. Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, 1804 to 1881. Even sleepers are workers and collaborators on what goes on in the universe. Heraclitus, 5th century BC. Hide our ignorance as we will, a night of wine soon reveals it. Heraclitus. She gave me a smile I could feel in my hip pocket. Author Raymond Chandler. Seriousness is stupidity sent to college. Journalist P.J. O'Rourke. Go to meet destiny halfway, and destiny will come to your assistance. Svetlana Alliluyeva, daughter of Joseph Stalin and American citizen. Fashions fade. Style is eternal. Designer Yves Saint Laurent. People seldom see the halting and painful steps by which the most insignificant success is achieved. Anne Sullivan, famed instructor to Helen Keller. I prefer tongue-tied knowledge to ignorant talkativeness. Cicero, 1st century BC. To talk without thinking is to shoot without aiming. English proverb. Technique is noticed most markedly in the case of those who have not mastered it. Leon Trotsky, Russian revolutionary. I haven't known anyone worth a damn who wasn't irascible. Poet Ezra Pound. Irascible means crabby. Wars are created to incur debt. Ezra Pound. In order to shake a hypothesis, it is sometimes not necessary to do anything more than push it as far as it will go. Philosopher Denis Diderot, 1713 to 1784. I judge people's charm by the ease with which I express myself in their presence. Playwright Natalie Clifford Barney, 1876 to 1972. Most virtue is a demand for greater seduction. Natalie Clifford Barney. It's true that heaven forbids some pleasures, but a compromise can usually be found. Molière, from Tartuffe. It is queer how it is always one's virtues and not one's vices that precipitate one into disaster. Rebecca West, English novelist, 1892 to 1983. Wisdom hath her excesses, and no less need of moderation than folly. Montaigne. He knows little who tells his wife all he knows. Clergyman Thomas Fuller, 1608 to 1661. Marry a mountain girl, and you marry the whole mountain. Irish proverb. And this completes Astute Quotations, Part 32. I tell you what, I got 7 more quotes here, and it's going to be about 2 or 3 months before I put a new batch of quotations up here. So let's polish off the final 7. The bigger your TV, the lower your class. Historian Paul Fussell. If we do not redefine manhood, war is inevitable. Paul Fussell. The intercourse of angels is a light. William Butler Yeats. To know one's own limitations is the hallmark of competence. Dorothy Sayers, crime writer. When we really worship anything, we love not only its clearness, but its obscurity. G.K. Chesterton. Style and structure are the essence of a book. Great ideas are hogwash. Vladimir Nabokov. The discipline of the written word punishes both stupidity and dishonesty. John Steinbeck. And this completes Astute Quotations, Part 30.